Hey guys, tonight we are heading somewhere unusual, somewhere dry, dusty, and echoing with the groan of stone on stone. You blink into the pale moonlight of a Greek hillside, where silence clings heavy in the air, only broken by the low rumble of a rock that looks much too big for any person to handle. The stars above are sharp pinpricks in velvet black, and the ground beneath you is rough, scattered with pebbles that jab your bare feet. A few olive trees stand crooked nearby, their branches twitching as if they too are trying to keep their balance on this slope. You feel your breath already tightening in your chest, and let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes here. Not without your morning coffee, a chiropractor, and maybe a forklift. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you do, I'd love it if you posted your location and local time in the comments, just so I know which corner of the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The night air clings cool on your skin as you shift against the slope. Before you, massive and undeniable, rests the boulder. It isn't just any rock. It's smooth in some places, rough in others, like it's been polished by centuries of rolling, grinding, falling. You run your hand along its side and feel ridges, where earlier attempts carved shallow scars into the stone. Each mark is a memory of a climb that ended badly. Dew glistens faintly along the surface, catching the silver of the moonlight, making the boulder look almost alive, like a sleeping beast. You can't help but shiver, wondering how anyone could wake up each day knowing this is their life. Push, slip, fall, repeat. Beside you, a man stirs. His beard is short but wiry, his tunic plain, dust-stained from constant labor. His shoulders are corded with muscle, not the glamorous kind you see in sculptures, but the sort built through relentless, repetitive strain. His eyes, when he glances your way, aren't hollow with despair as you might expect. They are sharp, even playful, as if daring you to laugh at the absurdity of it all. This is Sisyphus, the man cursed by the gods, forever rolling this colossal stone uphill, only to watch it tumble back down again. You hear faint whispers carried on the night breeze, almost as if the hillside itself remembers the stories. The gods had many reasons to dislike Sisyphus, his wit, his defiance, his habit of outsmarting death itself. Zeus never took kindly to mortals who thought too much of themselves, and Sisyphus had managed to cheat the king of the gods not once, but twice. That's like tricking your boss into giving you a raise, then stealing his sandals while he's not looking. Bold, yes. Suicidal, definitely. The rock looms above you as though waiting for its cue. Your palms itch with the memory of what's coming, the feel of weight shifting, the scrape of rough surface against skin. You take a deep breath, smelling dust and crushed time in the wind, and the hill ahead rises steep and merciless. It's not just steep, it feels endless, stretching into shadows that don't care where the sky meets the ground. Somewhere in the darkness, owls hoot softly, their voices mocking in their calm steadiness. Sisyphus plants his hands on the stone, his shoulders squaring. The muscles in his arms tense like ropes pulled tight. You half expect him to groan, to curse, to spit at the heavens, but instead, he smirks. A slow, knowing smirk that says, "This isn't punishment. This is routine." He glances at you as if inviting you in on the joke, then leans his weight into the rock. You step forward, your body reluctant, but drawn in by the gravity of the moment. The cool roughness of the stone meets your palms, and suddenly you feel how alive it is, immovable, stubborn, almost smug. It doesn't want to be pushed, and yet here you are. Together with Sisyphus you shove, the stone shifting an inch with a deep, grinding sigh, as though it resents the very idea of movement. The air fills with the smell of loosened earth, and tiny rocks skitter down the slope. And there, in that first shove, you realize something. The futility is real, yes, but so is the rhythm. It's like sweeping sand on a windy beach or trying to fold laundry when your cat sits on it every time. Pointless, frustrating, and yet weirdly grounding. Sisyphus exhales slowly, like a man beginning his daily meditation, and you can't help but laugh under your breath. The absurdity is inescapable, but also oddly comforting. Historians still argue whether Sisyphus's story was meant as pure punishment, or whether it carried hidden lessons about resilience, human pride, or the futility of resisting fate. Some even suggest the myth isn't about despair at all, but about finding meaning in repetition. As you feel the stone's cool surface bite into your hands, you begin to see why. Above, the stars seem to shift, the slope stretching higher into the darkness, and the boulder rolls forward again. Dust clings to your lips, and sweat beads already on your brow. You can almost hear the gods laughing somewhere in the distance. And yet, strangely enough, Sisyphus is still smiling. The boulder inches forward, and you feel the strain echo all the way down your spine. Your arms tremble as though they're caught between wanting to give up and wanting to prove something. Though what? You're not quite sure. Maybe you're just proving you're still stubborn enough to stand beside Sisyphus. He leans into the stone with practiced ease, his sandals digging into the dirt, his breath steady, almost casual, like someone settling into their morning jog. You, on the other hand, are already wheezing like a bellows that's sprung a leak. The moonlight keeps shifting, pooling around the edges of the slope so that shadows blur and deepen. The hillside groans with the slow slide of gravel under the boulder's weight. You imagine this sound has been heard for centuries, like a grim lullaby of eternal labor. The gods must be somewhere above, sipping nectar, smirking at this endless spectacle. You can almost picture them, Zeus with his thunderbolt tucked under one arm, Hera raising an unimpressed eyebrow, Hermes pretending not to laugh. But here's the strange part. Sisyphus isn't cursing. He isn't begging for release. Instead, he whistles. Not a tune you recognize, but something simple and repetitive, like the clatter of a loom or the steady beat of a hammer on iron. The sound keeps time with the grind of the stone, transforming the uphill push into something closer to rhythm than punishment. You nearly choke out a laugh. Only Sisyphus would turn his eternal doom into background music. Your shoulders burn, and sweat trickles down your back despite the chill of night. You're tempted to flop into the dust and just watch him do the impossible alone. And yet you don't. Maybe it's the absurdity of it all, maybe it's pride, or maybe it's that odd smile he keeps wearing. The one that says he knows something you don't. It's like he has a secret tucked between his teeth. A trick for surviving eternity without losing himself. Historians still argue whether the myth of Sisyphus was a warning against human arrogance, or a lesson in resilience. Some scholars think it was invented just to scare people into respecting the gods. Look what happens when you sass Zeus. Others whisper it's a mirror held up to ordinary life work that feels endless chores that never stay done. You mop the floor, and 5 minutes later someone spills wine. You fold clothes, and suddenly the basket fills again. In that sense, maybe Sisyphus isn't a figure of pity, but of recognition. We've all rolled that rock in one way or another. Hill steepens, and the stars seem to hang farther away. Your lungs protest, dragging in air that tastes of dust and time. The stone keeps pressing back, heavier than it has any right to be. But there's a rhythm now. Push, step, breathe. Push, step, breathe. You catch Sisyphus's eyes for just a second, and they sparkle, not with despair, not even with anger, but with something closer to amusement. As though the great cosmic joke landed, and he's decided to laugh along. Somewhere in the dark, a night insect buzzes loudly, stubbornly circling your head. You swat at it with one grimy hand and nearly lose your balance. Sisyphus chuckles under his breath, muttering something about how even the gods couldn't invent a worse distraction than a mosquito. The absurdity of it all pushes you to laugh too, your voice ragged but real. You think back to the myths that claimed Sisyphus once chained Thanatos, the god of death himself, to keep mortals from dying. Imagine that a whole world where people stop dying, all because one man didn't feel like going quietly. Quirky tidbit, sure, but it explains why Zeus eventually had enough. If you can trap death in your cellar like an unwelcome dinner guest, then you're bound to make enemies upstairs. On Olympus, scholars still debate whether this part of the story was literal myth, a metaphor for wit over fate, or just some ancient storyteller's way of poking fun at the gods' egos. Your muscles throb. But strangely, the work feels a little easier. Maybe it's because the rhythm has settled into your bones. Maybe it's because you've stopped fighting the futility of it. Or maybe it's because the absurdity has numbed you into surrender. Whatever the reason, the hill doesn't seem quite as cruel in this moment. The stone rolls forward another few feet, dust cascading down its sides, and for a brief instant, you swear you see it shimmer in the moonlight, like it's glowing with some secret energy. Sisyphus doesn't pause. He doesn't need to. His body is tuned to this motion the way a harp is tuned to its strings. Every push is muscle memory, every grunt part of the song. He's a man who has made peace with his boulder, or at least with the idea that it's not leaving anytime soon. You want to ask him how he smiles, how he laughs, how he hasn't crumbled under the weight of eternity. But you don't, because the answer is already there in the rhythm, in the whistle, in the smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. The trick isn't escaping the task, it's reshaping the task until it stops feeling like punishment. Legs ache, your hands sting with tiny cuts from the stone surface, and your breath comes ragged. And yet, when you glance up the slope, you realize you're still climbing. The rock hasn't rolled back down. Not yet. And for tonight, maybe. That's enough. The ground crunches beneath your sandals as you press forward, and the boulder answers with its low, grinding groan. It's a sound that might lull you if it weren't tethered to so much sweat. Dust swirls up with every shove, coating your tongue, until you wonder if the gods chose this hill precisely for its chalky cruelty. Sisyphus doesn't spit, doesn't even grimace. Instead, he hums a slow, meandering tune that somehow keeps your legs moving. You glance at him, expecting to see strain carving lines into his face. Instead, he looks almost casual, like someone pushing a heavy cart through a marketplace. There's a trick in his shoulders. He never fights the rock, never jerks against it. He leans and eases as though he's discovered the stone's rhythm. You stumble trying to copy him, nearly getting pinned against the slope. He chuckles quietly and mutters, "Don't wrestle it, dance with it." That's the first time you realize he's not resisting his fate. He's choreographing it. Historians still argue whether this myth was meant to terrify mortals into obedience or to hand them a peculiar kind of comfort. Was it a cosmic, "don't mess with the gods" PS, or was it a sly nod to the fact that everyone, from kings to potters, carries their own endless loads? Some scholars even say the Greeks used Sisyphus as a metaphor for daily toil fields that need weeding, jars that always need refilling, floors that never stay swept. You sigh, realizing how much your modern laundry basket feels like this very slope dot as the climb grows steeper. You hear small stones tumbling back down, clicking like scattered dice. You wonder who first spread the tale of this hill. Maybe a farmer telling his kids why chores never end. Maybe a priest warning the congregation about divine punishment. Or maybe, just maybe, it was Sisyphus himself, shouting down the slope in one long joke. Guess what I'm up to tonight? You cough on the dust and mutter that you'd kill for a jug of water. Sisyphus grins and says, "Even if you had one, you'd spill it halfway up." It's not comforting, but the absurd honesty makes you laugh through the ache in your chest. The two of you pause briefly, catching breath, the moon painting your shadows long and thin across the slope. The boulder looms above you like a reluctant companion, enormous and yet somehow familiar. A quirky detail about the myth some versions claim. Sisyphus once tricked Persephone into letting him leave the underworld altogether, using nothing more than smooth words and a theatrical sob story. Imagine that. Bargaining with the queen of the dead like a street vendor haggling over olives. Historians still argue whether this part was ever meant seriously, or if it was just comic relief woven into a darker tale. Either way, you find yourself admiring the gall of a man who could talk his way out of Hades. The slope tilts sharper, and your calves scream in protest. The rock shifts dangerously, threatening to roll back. Instinct tells you to panic, but Sisyphus doesn't flinch. He steadies it with one shoulder, waiting for the momentum to settle, and only then nudges it forward again. He looks at you sideways and says, "See? No rush. The hill isn't going anywhere." You almost groan at the wisdom hidden in that casual phrase. The hill isn't going anywhere. Neither is the boulder. Neither are you. Somehow that thought, instead of crushing you, loosens the tightness in your chest. Above, a faint breeze whispers through scrubby grass, carrying the scent of time and dust. Your stomach rumbles, and you can't help imagining a bowl of figs, or maybe bread still warm from the oven. The gods surely eat like that, lounging with ambrosia while mortals grind their teeth against eternity. You almost shout up at the sky, but you catch yourself. If the gods are watching, why give them the satisfaction? Better to keep moving, keep laughing, keep humming with Sisyphus. The stars wheel overhead, careless of your effort. One shooting streak glances across the sky, and you imagine it's some forgotten hero falling from Olympus, sentenced to a task less poetic than yours, like polishing Zeus's sandals forever. Somehow that thought comforts you. Misery does love company, even mythical company. Step after step, push after push, your body learns the rhythm. The dust no longer tastes quite so bitter. The stone feels less like an enemy, more like a stubborn dance partner. You realize that you've stopped counting the distance left. You're just moving. The hill stretches endlessly, but for now, the climb itself is enough. You feel it before you see it, the faint slackening under your palms, the invisible thread between your legs, and the rock loosening like a knot undone in the dark. The boulder hesitates, then decides against you with the confidence of an old friend who knows your tells. It pauses just long enough for you to hope, and then it moves not forward but backward, as if the hill suddenly remembered its job description. Pebbles shoot past your ankles in panicked little cascades. The low grind becomes a purr, then a growl, then the full-bodied rumble of a thing very sure of gravity and very unimpressed with your plans. "Ah," Sisyphus says, almost cheerfully, as though the stone has told a joke he's heard 1,000 times. There it is. He steps aside with the grace of a man who has practiced not getting crushed. You scramble to mimic him, shoulder pressed to the rock just enough to guide, not enough to die for it. Dust sprays your shins. Your throat catches with that chalky taste you're starting to think the gods ordered in bulk. The boulder rolls past your hip like a whale brushing a boat, and then it gathers itself and goes slow at first, then hungry, eating distance with a patience that feels like mockery. You jog alongside, ready to dive if the stone decides to be theatrical. It doesn't. It knows the path too well for drama. It hums down the groove carved by centuries of your new friend's effort, a polished track where scrub won't grow and the ground keeps the memory of every descent. Your ankles skid. Your arms windmill. Sisyphus laughs a small, genuine sound that somehow deflates your panic like a pin in a balloon. "Breathe," he says, as the boulder coasts to the base. "We'll make it late for its appointment with the bottom some other time." At the foot of the hill, the stone settles with a sigh, as if pleased to be home. Silence returns in a broad, expectant sweep. The moon has drifted west, turning olive leaves into silver teeth. Your chest lifts and falls, feeling scraped thin. Inside, Sisyphus pats the boulder once gentle, almost affectionate. "Stubborn," he murmurs. but reliable. He grins at you, dust filming his teeth, like old donkeys and new sandals. You cough, and the dust answers by sticking. More firmly. Your tongue feels like it's been breaded for frying. Sisyphus hands you a skin of water. You sip greedily, and some of it actually becomes you instead of relocating to the dust. Every day? You ask, voice rough. He shrugs. Every night. Most nights, he says. The scheduling is flexible. The results are consistent. Joke number 1 arrives in your brain with soft shoes. Somehow, the consistency itself is soothing. Mainstream fact floats like a quiet lantern here, in ancient Greek thought. Punishments in the afterlife often match the nature of a person's false lex talionis with a poetic flourish. Tantalus starves beside unreachable fruit for crimes of hubris and betrayal. Ixion spins on a fiery wheel for attempted assault and treachery. Sisyphus, famed trickster and oathbreaker, gets a labor that undoes itself, a neat metaphor for cleverness. Turned in circles. You taste the old moral shape of it even as you gulp air. The task mirrors the man, a reflection thrown on a hillside instead of water. Sisyphus squats, rubbing his palms on his tunic, raising new clouds he pretends not to see. We'll start again, he says, as if suggesting another round of a board game. You stare up at the slope, which looks taller now that you've fed it your momentum. The path of the descent gleams your undoing, polished to a ribbon. You almost expect the gods to lean over the rail of the sky and applaud. Historians still argue whether the Sisyphus myth began as a local Corinthian cautionary tale or a pan-Hellenic parable about political deceit. Some read in it the critique of a crafty king who violated Xenia, the sacred code of hospitality, betraying guests for gain. Others see an allegory for seasonal cycles, the stone of the sun rolling up summer's arc and tumbling into winter. The debate hums like cicadas in the night. Is this a story of ethics, nature, or both? You wipe your mouth on your wrist and decide that arguments also roll downhill, endlessly. The lull between attempts is its own ceremony. Sisyphus walks the perimeter of the boulder, testing with his fingers, locating the shoulder-smooth niches, the pushable seams. He listens, not to the gods, but to the stone. You find yourself doing the same, the way you might listen for a stubborn jar's thread to catch. We angle left next time, he says. It humored us for a bit. You nod as if you too have. A long history with boulder mood swings. A quirky tidbit bubbles up from somewhere, maybe a shepherd's tale. Maybe Sisyphus' own invention, that he once painted tiny eyes on the stone. Just 2 little dots of charcoal, so he could see who was watching whom. He swears all his best climbs happened on the days the eyes looked brave. You cock your head as he pulls a sliver of burnt twig from behind an olive trunk and with mock solemnity dots 2 small circles near the rock's crown. The boulder gazes off toward the hill as though it knows the route by heart. There, he says. Now it can aim. He rises, stretches, and the 2 of you step in again. Hands find stone, feet find grit. The night finds its rhythm. The first shove after a roll down feels heavier, like a conversation begun again at the beginning. Your shoulders protest the déjà vu. You picture the hill as a bureaucrat stamping denied in triplicate. Sisyphus sets his stance and counts under his breath. 1, 2, push. The boulder grudges an inch. Your breath rejoins the world as sound. You climb. The slope that was once your enemy is just terrain again. You find the little break in the path where time grows thick and pretend it's good luck. Sisyphus whistles. That same 3-note tune, the one that sounds like a weaving shuttle. You really don't get bored? You ask, grunting as you adjust your hands. Of course I do, he says, cheerful as a man discussing weather. I just refuse to let boredom use my name. Joke number 2 slots into place as smoothly as the stone will not. The rock resists more politely this time, as if the painted eyes have given it a sense of duty. You ease with Sisyphus into that push and breathe cadence, the kind that makes hours blur into a manageable fog. The top is not a destination, only an idea you nod to from a distance. Here, you rediscover the trick he taught you: tend to the small world. The runnel of dust under your toes, the cool oval where your left palm sits, the olive branch that always squeaks when wind slides through. And yet, as the grade steepens, the slide returns. It's slower now, a careful refusal, the rock auditioning for reverse. You brace, and for a moment it's a stalemate, the kind statues envy. Then a pebble skitters, your right foot kisses emptiness, and the boulder remembers how to be a river. It rolls. You do the sidestep you practiced, and this time it's a neat dance. No flail, no panic. Just a quick pivot and a small curse, swallowed to keep the night PG. The stone groans down the groove again, your new eyesight tracing every nick. A notch by moonlight dot at the bottom. Sisyphus wipes his brow with a flourish like an actor closing a scene. Intermission, he declares. He offers you a fig from a pouch you swear wasn't there 5 minutes ago. Contraband, he whispers, with the proud mischief of a child smuggling cookies into a library. The sweetness breaks on your tongue like a tiny sunrise. You chew, with gratitude and a little suspicion that the gods are peeking through their fingers to see if you're having too much fun. Mainstream detail makes a quiet cameo. Greek funerary art often shows the dead engaging in familiar tasks women at. Looms, men with tools, suggesting that the afterlife was imagined as continuous with life, not alien to it. The idea that eternity might echo our habits gives this hill a different flavor. If forever must exist, perhaps it will at least include skills we know. You wonder what yours would be: typing, making tea, losing your keys with heroic consistency. Sisyphus taps the boulder, and the tiny charcoal eyes stare up slope, unblinking. Again, he says, not grim, not resigned, simply present. You roll your shoulders, your body complains. Your feet find their arguments. You think of how many times you've answered an email only to get another, washed a bowl only to use it again, made a bed whose destiny is disarray before nightfall. You smile despite yourself. The gods have cursed you too, just on smaller, more hygienic hills. The next climb begins quieter. Less chatter, more breath. The moon lowers, softening from silver to a paler grace. A night bird calls twice and then forgets what it meant to say. You ease into a step that doesn't scrape. The stone hums with the reluctant approval of a cat allowing a lap. You realize that the fear of the slide has ebbed. You're no longer bracing for catastrophe every second. You are simply here, pushing a rock that will roll back down, finding ease in the flutter between effort and release. When it does roll, and of course it does, you meet the descent like a tide. No surprise in your bones, only a practiced bow. The boulder kisses the base again. You and Sisyphus breathe. He chuckles, the sound worn smooth by use, and you add your own, because refusing to laugh would feel like agreeing with the hill. We're getting better at coming back, he says. Joke number 3, and something like wisdom. You press your palm lightly to the stone's cool flank, and the charcoal eyes look if charcoal can, patient. Above, the gods keep their distance. The stars mind their own glitter. You and the man, with an infinite chore, handle the only part that's yours. The next push, and the next, and how gently you treat your lungs in between. The hillside quiets after the last roll down, as if the ground itself is catching its breath. You and Sisyphus stand with palms on your thighs, listening to the night settle back into its gentle ticking. Crickets sawing, a little wind combing. Through time, the soft clunk of your own heartbeat in your ears. From somewhere beyond the ridge, voices arrive thin at first, like reeds over water, then clearer, as though speech can climb a slope even when bodies can't. They are not the gods. They are the people who make a profession of opinion. Philosophers, drifting in like moonlit auditors. You don't see them, no cloaks flapping. No academies rolled up in travel size, but their words crowd the dark politely. One voice is lyrical, measured like a hymn. Another is dry enough to start a brush fire. A third laughs before he finishes any sentence, as if punctuating himself with delight. The air becomes an aggro without the pigeons. Sisyphus tilts his head, smiling as if the chorus is an old habit. They come most nights, he says, like owls that prefer syllogisms. You nod, and whether or not you believe in disembodied debate, the hillside now feels peopled by thought, a soft authoritative voice begins by reminding you that the story is older than this boulder's polishes and your present breath. Mainstream fact slides into the moment. Somewhere in those early Greek verses we still teach, Sisyphus appears in lists of the punished. In one famous voyage, a poet descends and glimpses the man with his rock, an image carried forward not as blueprint but as emblem. The voice notes, almost fondly, that myths persist because they can be worn many ways and still fit. You picture a robe that never frays, only changes hems. Another voice, crisp and impatient, calls the whole enterprise a civic warning label. Don't flirt with oath-breaking, don't trick guests, it says, or your afterlife becomes an endless audit. Sisyphus pats the boulder as if to say, audit accepted. You can't help it, you snort. The boulder, unoffended, maintains its career in resisting. A third tone sardonic, slightly amused, asks whether the punishment is tragedy or comedy. Comedy, it says, is repetition with timing. You remember the painted charcoal eyes on the stone and think, even the boulder has learned its cues. The laughter you let out is smaller now, almost a breath you forgot to spend. Joke number 1. Barely louder than the wind. You press your palms to grit and begin again, and the voices walk alongside like kinder taskmasters. One proposes that the punishment fits the crime, because deception is a wheel outsmarting becomes a loop that doubles back. Another counters that all labor circles, so the myth only exaggerates to make this circle visible. A third suggests lightly, almost teasing, that there's a kind of freedom in predictability. If the ending is guaranteed, the attention can live fully in the middle. Sisyphus hears that last part and nods like someone who already authored. The footnote: a stone clicks off your sandal and patters down the slope. You lean into the boulder with the modest arrogance of someone who has done a thing 4 times and feels qualified. The rock budges, complaining in its generous baritone. This, says a new voice, is where meaning hides. It sounds modern, the way wine sounds modern when poured into an old cup. It proposes that a mortal can become superior to fate by greeting it with a chosen posture. Sisyphus grins sideways. Posture, he says, and a better stance. He adjusts your feet by a finger's width, and the rock concedes another inch. Quirky tidbit arrives, capering. A prankish voice claims that a certain street philosopher once visited the hill with a little pot of olive oil, offering to lubricate the boulder, so it would at least be elegant in failure. Whether that happened or is just the kind of rumor. That happens to philosophers. The thought makes you wheeze laugh, and Sisyphus raises a cautionary palm. Gently, he says, save your lungs for the part where the rock argues. Historians still argue whether the myth was primarily theater, something a crowd could laugh at, and later chew like tough bread, or a sacred caution stuffed with lyric warning. Do these punishments say more about divine order or about civic anxiety? Were they ghost stories for late-night symposia or mirrors polished for citizens? The debate rolls as smoothly as your stone never will, and you realize the hillside has hosted this same panel for centuries. The questions knew only an accent. Push, breathe, slide your hands to fresh purchase. The boulder's skin is cooler on this side, dew beating like silver grit. Sisyphus whistles 3 notes and in a professorly slant, mutters, observation. The rock favors the right-hand groove after midnight. You store the data, not because it will save you, nothing saves you here, but because it delights you to pretend a field manual can be written. Joke number 2 peeks out in your brain. Chapter 1. How Not to Be Flattened. You keep it to yourself. The night already has good material. A sage, patient voice smelling somehow of olive wood and smoke, suggests that the punishment isn't about humiliation, but about intimacy. You learn a hill, it says, the way a potter learns a wheel. At that, your body agrees. You can predict where your shoulder will complain, which pebble will betray you, when the dust will need water. Familiarity fills the cracks that dread one's own. Mainstream detail tilts in from a different era. The schools that came later delighted in turning fate into exercise, stoics practicing consent to the inevitable, cynics laughing at the world's costume jewelry. It's not hard to imagine one of them visiting this slope and prescribing the task as a daily stoic set. 3 climbs. Breathe with the stars, accept the roll down as feedback. The thought cheers you in a sleepy, absurd way. You picture a young philosopher with a checklist, nodding solemnly as the stone undoes his progress. The boulder stalls near a scar in the path, the kind of ledge that looks negotiable until it has opinions. You lean harder, and the voices hush, like a crowd that knows when to let a soloist play. For 3 breaths, the whole hill narrows to a single friction point. Your left palm, the rock's grain, Sisyphus's quiet exhale. It almost goes. It almost doesn't. Then, with a grudging shiver, it surges a handspan upward and steadies. Sisyphus gives you a look that lives somewhere between triumph and shrug. There, he says, daggers sheathed. You answer with the kind of grin people reserve for someone who has shared their umbrella in a storm. Another scholar, this one impish, wonders aloud if comedy is the correct genre after all. If the audience laughs, the gods lose something, he says. Power prefers solemnity. You glance up, half expecting lightning. None comes. The gods, if present, are saving this spectacle for later, or they're busy with a banquet. You picture Zeus discovering a grape with a bruise and starting a subcommittee. Quirky, breaks again through thought like a goat through a garden. Sisyphus claims he once named the boulder, tried different dignified Greek things, stone of dawn, companion of the long climb before settling, with a wink on pebble. It keeps us honest, he says. No heroics, just pebble. The tiny charcoal eyes seem to approve this demotion, gazing at the slope as if cataloging each nick for future gossip. Joke number 3 lands neatly, and you swear the hills. Angle softens for a breath. Historians still argue whether the particular charm of this tale comes from its cruelty or its clarity. Cruelty would be the god's part. Clarity belongs to the man who refuses to be erased by routine. The voices agree and disagree in a polite tangle. You push. The rock listens, then argues, then listens again. Somewhere in the discourse, your mind learns to rest inside motion. The repetition stops feeling like a verdict and starts feeling like a metronome. You catch the philosopher laughter thinning, the way birdsong thins before dawn. The chorus recedes toward whatever city waits for people who live on ideas. You remain. With the stone, the slope, the familiar burn in your forearms, and the pleasant ache of muscles, busy doing the only thing they can. Sisyphus nods toward the ridge. They'll be back, he says. They always bring fresh shoes for the same road. You believe him. You angle your feet. You find the little ridge your toes liked last time. You inhale time, dust, a rumor of olives. The rock moves a handspan. The night makes room. If the gods are listening, they hear what you hear now. Not tragedy, not triumph, but the soft music of labor that has decided to be its own reward. The sky above the ridge loosens its grip on black, letting pink leak across the seams like watercolor on damp paper. You squint at it as though dawn itself has been smuggled in. The boulder rests for a moment against a patch of thistles, and Sisyphus pretends to wipe sweat from its brow, muttering, "Even pebble deserves a sunrise break." You grin despite the weight pressing your shoulders. Sarcasm travels lighter than stone. The laborers of the hillside, your odd little fraternity shuffle and stretch. The day's first full breaths are taken in chorus, clouds of vapor puffing into the cold like miniature sacrifices. Someone coughs. Someone else cracks a knuckle so loudly it echoes off rock, and you imagine Zeus making a tally mark. You and Sisyphus exchange looks that say, well, at least we survived another midnight. Then, back to business. Mainstream fact. Threads through the ancient poets, especially the one who cataloged the wanderers and punishments, left Sisyphus to his eternal gym membership. They gave no stopwatch, no lunch breaks, no witty repartee, just a man, a rock, and a slope. Scholars trace the image across centuries, watching it become a touchstone of despair and resilience. You breathe it in with the dawn air, understanding why this one myth survived like a fossil in culture's limestone. But quirky detail bounces in, cheerful as a goat on loose gravel. Sisyphus tells you that on one memorable morning, the boulder actually got stuck mid-roll and refused to descend. It wobbled like a stubborn mule, leaving the gods above momentarily uncertain whether the punishment had malfunctioned. They sent Hermes to poke it with a stick, Sisyphus recalls, eyes twinkling. The stone rolled 2 feet, then stopped again, as if to say, no encore today. Hermes gave up apparently, and they waited until evening when the hills chill finally loosened the grip. You shake your head, almost giggling, because imagining an immortal messenger defeated by physics feels too good. That's your first joke of the section, and the dawn seems to laugh with you in pink light. The line of labor continues. Workers spectral or real. You can't quite decide, trudge with their own loads, baskets creaking. One man, perhaps two, spry for the hour, mutters something about trading stone for a nap. The others smirk without laughter, saving oxygen for muscle. The rhythm is hypnotic. Crunch, breath, crunch, breath. You slip easily into it, your body remembering the pattern before your brain does. Sisyphus hums, tuneless and low. It weaves with the pink horizon until you feel the slope itself is vibrating gently. A trick, he says between pushes, is to think of the climb as music. Every notch, every shove becomes a beat. And when the song ends with a roll down, well, you've just heard a familiar refrain. His philosophy drips as casually as sweat. You wonder if the boulder itself is the drum. Historians still argue whether these eternal punishments were meant to instruct or merely to entertain. Was it moral theater for ancient audiences? Don't lie, don't betray, don't outwit Zeus, or was it cosmic slapstick to provoke nervous laughter? Some scholars lean toward cautionary tale, others toward existential spectacle. You feel the debates echo in your ribs. Perhaps it's both, warning and wink. Tragedy and sitcom rerun. As the slope rises, the air thins, and your lungs argue. Sisyphus chuckles, adjusting his stance. Posture, my friend, saves lives, or at least kneecaps. You copy his bent knee method and discover the incline yields more politely. That's your second joke moment, realizing you're taking fitness tips from the most overqualified personal trainer in history. If a gym had his program, you think membership would include immortality, or at least sore calves forever. The sky deepens, gold joining pink, and shadows stretch away from you like polite servants. The rock grinds forward, its voice gravelly, but patient. You lean in, feeling each grain of parchment-dry earth beneath your palms. It is impossible, and yet not. That paradox becomes its own teacher. Mainstream history returns. Philosophers later adopted these myths as parables. Stoics praised endurance, cynics mocked grandeur, while later existentialists found the absurdity fertile ground. The punishment morphed from divine cruelty into human philosophy. And here you are, sweating at dawn, accidentally proving all their points with every push. Quirky detail slides back in. Sisyphus claims he once carved a small smiley face into pebble surface, a private joke for the mornings. The gods scrubbed it away, of course, he says. but for 3 dawns it looked like the rock was cheering us on. You can't help yourself, you laugh out loud. Joke number 3 lands, and even the hillside seems to grin. Dew sparkling like applause. Another debate phrase drifts across your thoughts. Historians still argue whether myths should be read literally as old religion or metaphorically as lessons of psyche. Did Sisyphus actually offend deities, or is he the human mind visualized, forever pushing memory, regret, ambition up the slope of time? The scholars quibble in your imagination, but your body only knows the ache in your shoulders. The rock lurches forward another foot. Sisyphus hums louder, maybe louder than the dawn roosters below. You realize the absurd trick is working. The boulder is less enemy, more metronome. The slope itself has joined the chorus. The pink horizon swells until it seems your task is stitched directly into the sunrise. Breath by breath, joke by joke, you learn the same lesson Sisyphus long ago discovered. Even absurdity, repeated enough times, finds its rhythm. And in that rhythm, oddly, lies peace. The sun finally stretches its limbs fully, spilling gold down the rocky slope, and suddenly the world feels as though someone tugged a curtain open. You blink against the brightness, the boulder shining like it has been polished overnight. Sisyphus pauses, hands braced on its rough skin, and quips, "Behold, the god's favorite breakfast cereal, Rocky Flakes." You snort, because humor is a survival strategy, and also because it really does glisten like something you'd sprinkle sugar over. The climb resumes. Each shove feels heavier under this new, merciless spotlight, as if the sun itself has been bribed to add weight. You adjust your grip, sweat already slick despite the cool morning. The stone creaks like a ship's hull. Somewhere in your memory, Thales' surface of how ancient masons in Greece quarried marble for temples, dragging blocks across wooden rollers greased with oil. That's your mainstream fact. Human civilization has always relied on repetitive, backbreaking labor, whether it's pyramids, temples, or walls. Monuments stand because ordinary people repeated the same exhausting task, until eternity seemed less daunting than disobedience. But Sisyphus raises a finger theatrically and shares a secret tidbit. Once, he says, he deliberately let the boulder roll back earlier than usual, pretending to forget the grip so he could take an extended nap at the bottom. The gods yelled, of course, he chuckles, but they didn't specify the timing, only that I had to push. So technically, I was still obeying. You shake your head, half impressed, half appalled. Imagine cheating eternity with a nap. Loophole. That's quirky detail number 1, and your first chuckle of the section. The slope grows steeper. You find yourself leaning forward until your nose nearly brushes the stone. Your shoulders burn, and you remind yourself this is the absurd trick. Don't expect the summit, just expect the next footstep. Each grain of gravel becomes a milestone. Somewhere below, a rooster crows again, as if determined to make this the longest morning of your afterlife. Historians still argue whether myths like this were ever meant to be believed literally. Did villagers actually think Sisyphus was up here eternally sweating? Or was the tale recited as allegory at banquets, with wine cups clinking as audiences nodded knowingly at the metaphor? Scholars debate tone endlessly: solemn tragedy, comic relief, or moral parable. The uncertainty itself feels like another hill to climb. Sisyphus sighs loudly, theatrically. The real trick, he explains, is finding small victories. Like, today I discovered this boulder has a dent perfect for scratching my shoulder itch. You glance and, sure enough, he shrugs against the rock, groaning with exaggerated pleasure. That's your second joke, absurd and oddly comforting. Eternity doesn't seem so bad when you can invent games of convenience. The path zigzags now, each switchback promising a brief reprieve from gravity. The sun flashes between ridges like stage lighting. In your half-delirious imagination, you picture the gods in an audience, munching olives, wagering drachmas on whether you'll slip. The absurdity is palpable, but it also feels strangely cozy-like. Knowing your failures are at least entertaining someone. Another quirky tidbit surfaces. Sisyphus once swears he caught the boulder humming back to him. Echoes, he admits, but I like to believe Pebble was singing. You tilt your head and listen, and sure enough, the grinding scrape has a rhythm almost melodic. You're not sure if it's your imagination or if rocks really do sing. When bullied up hills, joke 3 slides and naturally you mutter, if this keeps up, we'll need to start a band. Mainstream history circles back. Greek myths weren't static, they evolved with each retelling. Sisyphus's story appears in fragments across authors, some emphasizing his trickery with Thanatos, others his defiance of Zeus, still others simply his punishment. The continuity phrase like parchment edges gnawed by time. Scholars today sift those shards, debating which version was most widely believed. But here, under the sun, all versions collapse into one reality: you. Sisyphus, a rock, and gravity. The slope steepens to near vertical absurdity, your calves howling. Sisyphus grunts beside you, then mutters, posture, always posture, and you burst into a weary laugh. Even eternal suffering has its ergonomics. You feel the stone slip slightly, heart pounding, before you steady it again with both palms. It growls like a displeased animal, and for one absurd second you whisper, easy, Pebble. To your surprise, Sisyphus chuckles approvingly. The debate phrase returns. Historians still argue whether the punishment was meant as warning against hubris or as sly commentary on the futility of human striving. Either way, you realize mortals still tell the story thousands of years later. Maybe the true punishment is ours, forever debating its meaning while Sisyphus quietly makes peace with repetition. The summit remains invisible. The sun is merciless. The boulder's song drones on. Yet somehow the rhythm carries you forward, and absurdly, you smile. The morning heat thickens, as if someone draped a woolen cloak across the whole mountainside. Sweat slides into your eyes, stinging, and your hands tighten instinctively on the stone. The boulder feels alive now, radiating warmth back into your palms, almost smug about how much effort it requires. You mutter under your breath, we really should have asked for wheels. That's joke number 1, and even Sisyphus grins, teeth flashing white against his dusty face. You both pause to catch your breath. Below, the valley spreads out like a faded tapestry. Crooked olive trees dot the hillsides, their silvery leaves glimmering, while goats cluster near stone huts. The hum of a flute drifts faintly upward, some shepherd down there, blissfully unaware that 2 weary souls are rehearsing futility just above his head. It's the contrast that stings most. Peaceful lies beneath, eternal strain above. But Sisyphus shrugs at the scene. You get used to watching others move on, he says, voice even. It's like sitting in a theater, the same play looping forever. Except you're in the orchestra pit carrying props instead of enjoying the drama. You nod, struck by the image. The mainstream historical fact trickles in as naturally as the sweat. Greek shepherds, like the one you imagine, played pipes carved from reeds, instruments dating back thousands of years. Archaeologists have uncovered such pipes, some with finger holes worn smooth by endless practice. Music was one of humanity's first antidotes to monotony. Something the gods denied Sisyphus. Quirky tidbit time. Sisyphus swears that once, centuries ago, a shepherd actually wandered up the slope and asked if he could use the boulder as a drum for his tune. We made quite the duet, Sisyphus chuckles. The gods hated it, of course. Too much joy. You almost believe him, because the scraping rhythm does seem percussion-ready. Imagine the absurdity. An eternal rock turned into a metronome. But then Sisyphus's grin falters. His gaze hardens on the horizon. Historians still argue whether I'm meant to be pitied or scorned, he mutters. Was my cleverness admirable or arrogant? Was I punished for cunning or for truth-telling? The ambiguity gnaws at him, and maybe at you too. Myths rarely hand out clear morals. They leave mortals dangling, chewing endlessly. Much like this boulder never quite reaching the top. You resume pushing. The incline is crueler now, and your legs shake like reeds in wind. Every shove requires a grunt. You picture yourself from afar, a small figure clinging to a rock on an endless slope, almost comical. If you were carved into a vase painting, you'd look ridiculous. And maybe that's part of it. The gods ensured his punishment doubles as cosmic slapstick. That's joke too. Eternity as a divine blooper reel. But Sisyphus steadies the humor with perspective. The real trick, he says again, is pretending you're the one testing the gods. Every day I push and they wait for me to break. Every day I don't. Who's laughing then? The thought lingers. Perhaps endurance itself becomes rebellion. Your mind drifts to the stone surface, rough yet oddly patterned. You trace with your fingertips grooves that look like maps of rivers, islands, mountain ridges. Another quirky thought emerges. What if the gods painted the world onto this boulder, so he would forever carry Earth itself? A punishment, or a strange honor? You whisper the notion aloud. Sisyphus just chuckles. If that's true, then I've memorized every continent by hand. As the slope tilts crueler, a breeze whips dust into your mouth. You cough, splutter, then quip. I'm charging admission for this sauna. Joke 3 earns a tired laugh from your companion. Humor is Weber, is via. Your only currency here, spent lavishly, because what else do you have? You push until your shoulders burn like torches. Pebble, as you've nicknamed it, groans against the earth, a basso voice echoing in your bones. The climb becomes trance-like, step after step, strain after strain. The landscape blurs until all that matters is the rock's rough breath against. Your palms dot the debate phrase returns. Historians still argue whether Sisyphus's tale was crafted to mirror political reality. Some scholars claim it reflected endless wars, battles won and lost repeatedly without true progress. Others see it as warning against clever rulers who manipulate too much. You glance at Sisyphus's bent frame and wonder, does he embody politics, punishment, or just plain stubborn humanity? By the time you glance back down, the shepherd's flute song has faded, replaced by silence. The goats look like pebbles scattered on green cloth. The gods still don't intervene, because why would they? The show is best watched from afar. You drag another breath, shove another inch, and smile bitterly. The rock hasn't changed, but maybe you have. By late day, the sun plucks its gold threads from the rocks and leaves the slope to cool, a little at a time, like bread deciding it is done. The boulder rests against a shoulder of stone, and you and Sisyphus let your own shoulders sag, hearing. The hillside tick and settle. Shadows lengthen, pooling in the gullies. The light thins into that hour when everything looks older than it is, including you. A murmur rises from the base, soft as moth wings. At first you mistake it for wind, then for olive leaves gossiping. But the tones are too shaped, the syllables too careful. They climb in a hush, and with them comes a pale, steady drift of figures. Not fully here, not fully away, the way breath hangs on a cold morning. The shades arrive like an audience late to the theater, apologizing with their eyes for the rustle their nothing clothes make. They do not crowd. They appoint themselves half seats on half stones and look at the boulder. With a courtesy usually kept for altars, Sisyphus glances their way and lifts a hand in a greeting that contains no surprise. "Evening, neighbors," he says. You blink at him and he shrugs. They like the night scenes. A shade nearest you nods an acknowledgement so delicate it could have been a mistake in the air. Your own nod returns unchanged, which is the polite way to communicate with someone whose weight is mostly memory. Mainstream fact slides into place. The Greeks called such presences sakai, shades that haunt borders, tombs, crossroads, doorways, especially when a rite has been neglected, or a story not finished. We still read of the traveler who poured milk and honey into a trench so the dead would come up to speak. We still see on grave reliefs the little fair coin for the ferryman, pressed into a palm or tucked under a tongue. You feel the rightness of their hovering here at a labor that never completes, a doorway that never opens. The shades whisper among themselves, and the whispers incline toward rumor. He slows, one breathes, transparent eyes on Sisyphus's hands. Sometimes he slows. You tilt your head. The gossip is shaped like a question and an accusation at once. Another answers. He lengthens the path, steals time from the gods. Sisyphus hears, because rumor is a loud instrument, and smiles at you with a conspirator's tilt. If stretching a moment is theft, he says softly, then I'm a notorious shoplifter. You push your palm to the stone and feel the day's heat easing out of it. The boulder seems to sigh too, as if preparing for an evening performance. Sisyphus rolls his shoulders, and the shades lean forward, their faces brightening a fraction like lamps stirred by breath. It dawns on you late, but usefully, that their visits are not morbid sightseeing. It's companionship. The living rarely linger. The dead have nothing but time. A shade near your knee offers something from a cupped hand. You peer closer. It's an olive pit, faintly luminous, like a coal that decided against fire. For the ferryman, she mouths. The pit passes through. Your palm as if your skin were a polite suggestion. Quirky tidbit and gentle. Gifts from the dead do not weigh anything unless you believe in them hard enough. You tuck the knot pit into your sash anyway. Superstition spends well in twilight. One of the shades settles beside the boulder and hums in a voice so thin you might mistake it for the hillside cooling. The tune is barely there, but your bones answer it with a small lift. Another shade points. 2 fingers at the slope, sketching paths in the air, little detours, wider arcs. He slows here, it whispers. He breathes on the elbows of the trail. Sisyphus winks. What they call slowing, he murmurs to you, I call aiming. Historians still argue whether these tales of Sisyphus were intended to map the underworld's law-clear curfews, neat punishments, or to blur it with ambiguity. Did the ancients want a codex of consequences, or a room full of mirrors where a soul might study itself from inconvenient angles? The scholars bicker across centuries. Your slope listens without judgment. Here, law and improvisation share the same dust. Here, a man can slow his step and call it grace. The boulder awaits. Sisyphus places his palms as if greeting a friend. He insists on liking. You match him. The shades lean even farther forward, a tide pulled by effort. You push, the stone grudges. Gravel whispers backwards. For 10 heartbeats you think the roll-down is coming. Sisyphus angles his shoulder, not to win, but to keep the argument interesting. The rock hesitates, then consents to a handspan. The shades exhale in a sound like silk folded gently. You pause at a scrub of time to catch your breath, and a shade kneels to it, curious at its scent. It can't pluck a sprig, so it pretends, and you swear the time rises half a finger's breadth, as if honored by attention. Once, Sisyphus tells the audience, I timed my breaths to the cricket songs, and the rock behaved all evening. A wave of almost laughter moves through the ranks, brushing your ankles like cool water. You're close enough now to see where the path kinks and betrays future you. Sisyphus knows it too. Stride small, he says. Let gravity tell you its story before it tries to sell you its solution. You shorten your step and feel the hill's intention change from shove to suggestion. Joke number 1 arrives under your breath. I'll file a customer service ticket with gravity. Response time, geologic. A shade near your elbow appears. To grin, which is either excellent timing or the kind of coincidence that keeps legends alive, you make the corner. The stone murmurs rather than growls. Below, the valley is turning blue, then bluer. A boy in an unseen village will be called in from play. A lamp will be lit, a bowl placed. A chair remembered by the curve it made in it yesterday. Up here, the routine is different and the same. The shades attend not just for spectacle, but for a theme they recognize: return. They are, after all, experts in it. Another rumor floats up, more mischievous. He sings to the rock, a shade tells its neighbor, as if revealing a scandal. He calls it by 100 names. Sisyphus hears this too. His eyebrows suggest the possibility. Pebble, he says to the stone, you know your steps. You add your own title, irreverent, most improved boulder. Joke number 2 earns you a hushed ripple from the gallery, the kind of applause ghosts manage by agreeing together to exist a little more firmly for a heartbeat. Mainstream history glows briefly on the edge of thought. Roadside shrines to heroes. And the dead line the travel routes of Greece, little pillars with offerings of oil. Wreaths, crumbs casual piety for those passing by. This hill has no pillar, but the audience is shrine enough. Their watching dignifies the task. Their presence is the wreath. The slope steepens like a sentence that forgot how to end. The stone shifts, not forward. You and Sisyphus step aside into the practiced ballet of survival. The boulder goes, a deliberate river. The shades do not cry out. They have seen this show longer than the gods have. You jog alongside, keeping the rock company without trying to deny it its destination. Dust rises in modest curtains. At the base, a small cloud shakes itself and sits. Silence again, then a shade's whisper. And yet he slows. Another adds almost tenderly. And yet he laughs. Sisyphus bows not deeply, not theatrically, just enough to acknowledge their attendance. He plucks a fig from that impossible pouch, splits it with his thumbs, and hands you half. The sweetness is persuasive. You eat it, and the taste knows how to find the back of your tongue where tiredness keeps a chair. Joke number 3 wanders in, wearing a chalky grin. If there's an afterlife HR, you say, I'd like to request a new manager. Maybe one who schedules summits. Sisyphus snorts into his fig. A shade near the thyme bush lifts its face to the breeze, as if smelling your audacity. Historians still argue whether a man who slows his task is defying a god or merely defining himself. The shades who once had names and habits and favored cups give their vote by showing up again tomorrow. You find yourself grateful for an audience that expects nothing but a decent push. Night folds the slope into fewer colors. The boulder sleeps like a moon that forgot to rise. The shades rise like mist toward paths you cannot see, leaving a faint chill where their benches of air had been. You and Sisyphus stand at the base, full of figs and rumor. He taps the stone. Once, a promise made and received. Again, he says, the word warm as bread. You roll your shoulders. Your hands find their scars. The hill offers its old argument. And because you are learning, you smile as if you know the punchline, and still enjoy waiting for it to land. Dawn hesitates. It hovers in a pale gray bowl before tipping light across the stones. You and Sisyphus wait at the base, the boulder already breathing its slow, stony rhythm. The night's chill clings, but the sky insists on painting over it. You stretch the stiffness out of your shoulders, and the ground crunches beneath your feet as if breaking a thin crust of frost. This is the hour when routine can disguise itself as renewal, when repetition feels briefly like invention. Sisyphus pats the stone with both hands. Morning calisthenics, he mutters, as though the gods intended this to be a fitness program rather than a punishment. You notice the muscle memory in his arms, the efficient turn of wrist and hip. He has worn grooves in his body like the grooves in this hill. Historians still argue whether these myths were literal punishments or moral metaphors. Did the Greeks intend Sisyphus to be an object lesson, beware hubris, or a cosmic gag? Either way, the sun rises and he prepares to lift again. The stone shifts under your palms, heavy but not impossible, like a reluctant animal coaxed back into its pen. Gravel slides away, murmuring, and the path greets you with its first slope. Your legs complain, but softly complaints rehearsed too often lose their bite. Sisyphus chuckles. Knees like these could sponsor a medical scroll. That's joke. Number 1, and your laugh comes out ragged but willing. A breeze brings with it the faint tang of smoke. Down in the valley, breakfast fires spark alive. The smell of barley porridge drifts upward, a reminder that mortals somewhere have the luxury of sitting down to eat rather than rolling their meals uphill. You remember another quirky tidbit. Some Athenians carried small hand mills in their households, grinding barley daily for bread and porridge. Imagine a family rhythm where the song of grinding stones marked the hours. Up here, your grinding stone is much larger and less edible. The path narrows at a jagged shoulder. You lean, pressing into the boulder's weight, and your breath paints short clouds in the cool air. Sisyphus whistles tunelessly, perhaps to steady the rhythm. His eyes flick to you. Funny thing, if you stop listening to the gods and start listening to the hill has better stories. Joke number 2 slips out of you. Better. Pacing 2. The gods could use an editor. He barks a laugh that wakes a bird from its scrub. Midway up, sweat makes its early claim. You and Sisyphus pause, palms still braced, and watch the morning ripen. Farmers are dots in the valley now, bending low. The plows clatter faintly, like distant cutlery. You notice how the horizon smears into blue haze. The wall of mountains resembles a painted backdrop, flat and deliberate. You half expect someone to roll it up and replace it with another. Maybe that's the gods' true stagecraft. Repetition not as punishment, but as scenery management. Sisyphus gestures at the valley. See how they push earth with plows, as I push stone? Every task has its drag, every harvest its weight. Mainstream fact helps him. Early Greek agriculture relied heavily on simple wooden plows, often pulled by oxen, barely scratching the soil. Productivity was meager, but the cycle was constant. Work that repeats is not always cursed. Sometimes, it is just life written in longer sentences. Your boots slip on loose grit, and you steady yourself with an undignified hop. Graceful, Sisyphus comments deadpan. Joke number 3 rises from you before you can help it. The hill should consider adding handrails. The boulder creaks, perhaps amused, and continues its climb. The slope steepens, and you discover that breathing itself becomes a kind of discipline. In through your nose, out through your mouth, each gust measured like a metronome. Sisyphus nods approvingly. You're learning to time the climb, not fight it. He adjusts his grip, guiding the stone's center of gravity with casual authority. He makes it look like persuasion, not struggle. At the next bend, the hill tests your attention. The stone leans sideways as though flirting with a tumble. Together you correct it, and the path swallows the crisis. You notice a sprig of wild thyme crushed underfoot, its scent sharp as a wake-up call. Another quirky tidbit. The Greeks associated thyme with courage, sprinkling it in baths and burning it in temples. You inhale deeply, half pretending the gods just handed you a bravery upgrade. The boulder pauses, balanced for a heartbeat. Sisyphus wipes his brow, squinting at the slope above. The sky has shifted from gray to gold, a smear of light spreading like melted honey. For a moment, the stone looks gilded, as if the gods admired his persistence enough to decorate his burden. But it's only sunlight, temporary and thin. The rock remains the same, eternal and indifferent. At last, inevitability reasserts itself. The stone stiffens, resists, then shrugs free of your insistence. You step back, trained now, while Sisyphus angles his body to avoid the crush. The rock gallops downward, scattering gravel like applause. The valley echoes its passage until silence folds the slope again. You stand at the base, chest heaving, hands sore. Sisyphus dusts his palms and says, almost conversationally, "That was the warm-up." You grin, despite yourself. Maybe you are. starting to see the trick, not to dread the repetition, but to treat each push as a rehearsal that never needs a finale. The boulder waits. The day has only begun. And you, with sweat already drying in the morning breeze, find yourself oddly curious. For the next round. The second climb begins before your muscles finish arguing with the first. Sisyphus doesn't wait long. He leans his shoulder into the stone again, and you follow, because what else are you going to do? The gods aren't handing out sick days. Gravel shifts, the boulder grumbles, and your feet fall into rhythm without needing permission. It's like a song you don't like, but know all the lyrics to unavoidable, irritatingly catchy, and maybe, just maybe, comforting. Above. The sun stretches its arms wider, washing the hillside in pale yellow. Shadows retreat, reluctant as children. Told to leave a game. You glance back once. The valley below is already alive. Figures dotting the fields, smoke curling in thin ribbons from hearths. This hill may be punishment, but it overlooks a world that keeps spinning its own small labors. Historians still argue whether the myth of Sisyphus reflects agricultural toil, a metaphor for plowing endlessly, sowing only to repeat again next season. If so, every farmer below is a minor Sisyphus, rolling furrows instead of stones. Sisyphus snorts. At least their stones grow bread. Joke number 1 lands with a crooked grin, and you admit it's not wrong. Your stone grows only calluses. Halfway up, sweat prickles along your temples. The air here carries a different weight, a mix of heat rising from stone and the lingering cool of the shaded side. It's like walking through alternating moods of the hill, cheerful warmth, sulking chill. You imagine the mountain as a moody teenager, rolling its eyes each time you push the rock higher. Joke number 2 drifts out. This hill needs therapy. Sisyphus chuckles, but keeps his eyes on the stone. The path curves, showing its teeth. Stones stick up like broken molars, and your feet complain with every step. You steady the boulder carefully, guiding it around sharp edges. It's strange your hands begin to learn the rock's language, its stubborn tilts and grudging compliance. The weight doesn't change, but your understanding of it does. You wonder if that's the real punishment, becoming fluent in futility. A hawk circles overhead, its cry slicing the morning air. You pause just long enough to watch it glide effortlessly on invisible currents. Now there's a job worth having, you mutter. Sisyphus raises one eyebrow. Don't be fooled. Even hawks have to eat mice over and over. Joke number 3 hides inside his dryness, and you can't argue. The incline grows steeper. Your breath scratches like sandpaper, and the boulder presses back, testing your will. You remember another quirky tidbit. Some ancient writers described Sisyphus as clever enough to chain Thanatos, the god of death, for a time delaying mortality itself. Imagine that trick, the whole world unable to die until Ares intervened. It's comic and terrifying, the kind of myth that blurs punishment with prank. You tell Sisyphus this as you push, and he smiles faintly. Yes, for a while, even death had to wait in line. That was my real victory. At a flat stretch, you stop. The rock rests like a sulking ox. Your hands sting, raw against its rough skin, and Sisyphus offers you a dry fig from a pouch at his side. You bite into it, the sweetness startling against the dust in your mouth. For a moment, the punishment tastes almost like a picnic. The sun climbs higher, throwing sharper shadows now. Heat gathers on the rock until it feels alive, pulsing warmth into your palms. Sisyphus narrows his eyes at the ridge above. This is where it always slips, he says. Every hill has a memory. This one likes to win here. His tone is not bitter, just familiar, like a chess player acknowledging a favorite trap. Together, you push harder. Your shoulders burn, your lungs drag air like buckets from a dry well. Each step feels like betrayal. The stone should not move, yet it does, and somehow you are complicit. The crest nears, jagged against the brightening sky. For one foolish heartbeat, you imagine succeeding, shoving the stone past its doom. But the rock knows its lines better than you do. With a low groan, it halts. Balance teeters, then tips. You leap aside, dust exploding as the boulder rushes downhill, faster, louder, uncaring. The valley greets it with thunder that fades into silence. You exhale slowly. The ritual repeats, and you know it will repeat again. But something inside you has shifted. You're beginning to see the rhythm, not the failure. The climb isn't a failed story, it's an eternal one. Sisyphus claps your shoulder. Good. Push. Now let's not keep eternity waiting. His grin, tired but unbroken, pulls you back to the base. And so the day rolls on. The hill resets, the air cools its temper, and you and Sisyphus stand beside the boulder like two conspirators who keep failing on purpose, just to see the supervisor's face. He rubs the dust from his palms and grins at the sky with a look you've seen on children right before they hide someone's sandals. You know, he says, voice almost tender, every roll is also a prank on Zeus. He expects tragedy. I give him timing. He taps the rock twice, as if knocking on a friend's door. Comedy is just rhythm wearing work boots. You play along because the alternative is despair, and despair is a heavy costume in this heat. So the punchline. You say, bracing your shoulder, is that the stone always falls? Sisyphus nods, exactly. And yet each time I decide when the laugh arrives. He angles the boulder a fraction, enough to feel like mischief. If you can't choose the ending, choose the beat. A little wind tests the time bushes. The slope replies with its patient hush. Historians still argue whether the Greeks wanted their myths served straight or with a wink, if the gods were to be feared at all hours or gently teased during sanctioned festivals. Sisyphus tilts his head as if he's been eavesdropping. For centuries on that debate. At the city Dionysia, he says, they laughed at statesmen by daylight and sacrificed by torchlight. Mortals multitask. Mainstream fact strolls in beside his quip. The great festivals of Athens paired tragedy with comedy and satyr plays, allowing the same crowds to mourn, laugh, and worship in consecutive afternoons. If laughter was sacrilege, the priests didn't. Get the memo, or else sacredness had a bigger laugh than we think. You and Sisyphus lean. The rock nudges forward, gravel purring underfoot. Rule one of pranking the gods, he adds. Never deny them the show. Improve it. He puckers. His lips and whistles something off-key that makes your brain think of a goat learning the flute. Joke number 1, you mutter. Zeus invents lightning. We invent hold music. Sisyphus snorts, merely losing his stance to the giggle, then recovers with a dancer's knee and the smugness of a man who just saved both of you from irony. Quirky. Tidbit sidles in, wearing a rumor's grin. Later storytellers claimed Sisyphus might be the real father of Sly. See Gray-Eyed Odysseus, a genealogical prank tucked into the family tree. Pure gossip, Sisyphus says, though the sparkle behind his eyes refuses to plead innocent. If true, you say, then cunning is hereditary, he shrugs, or contagious. The slope evens for half a dozen heartbeats, a corridor of mercy. You breathe through your nose, out your mouth, the way Sisyphus taught you, and let the rhythm take care of the thinking. He continues, tone lighter than breath. When the stone slides, I imagine Zeus leaning forward, sure he's taught me a lesson. But every time, I greet the roll like an old friend. Nothing ruins a punishment like good manners. He pats the rock. After you, sir. Historians still argue whether Sisyphus's defiance was political, an oathbreaker king of Corinth punished for abusing Xenia, sacred hospitality, or existential, a portrait of human will confronting an indifferent order. You can feel both in the way he jokes, a former ruler heckling the empire of heaven, and a man testing the geometry of patience. Either way, the prank functions. Humor steals a spoonful of power from anyone. Who expects you to weep on cue? The rock balks at a ridge like a mule that's read the script. You and Sisyphus adjust, toes carving perches, shoulders agreeing to disagree with gravity. Another of my favorites, he says between pushes, was painting a mustache on pebble. You blink. On the boulder? On the idea of it. He clarifies, delighted with himself. A charcoal grin no god could scrub from my mind. For 3 days the hill looked like it had opinions. Joke number 2 pops out of you. Call it the thinker, but grittier. The boulder offers a dignified creak, which you choose to hear as agreement. Mainstream history peeks in with sandals, dusty from the road. Comedy in Athens not only teased the mighty but named them Aristophanes, lampooned politicians, philosophers. Even foreign policy, turning state anxieties into punchlines that an entire city could exhale together. Laughter was a pressure valve. Audiences left lighter, if not better behaved. Sisyphus, without a stage, improvises the same therapy on a steeper floor. You pass the shadow of a bent olive, the light thinning into a soft glaze. Sisyphus lowers his voice, as if a temple stood nearby. I time the roll for when Hermes looks. Away, he confides. It makes him spill his nectar. Slippery sandals, slippery schedule. You're messing with the messenger? You say he grins. Only enough to keep his cardio honest. You picture the divine courier skidding on ambrosia and nearly bark a laugh into the dust. The hill doesn't mind. It prefers sincere noises. Historians still argue whether ritual inversion, those sanctioned moments when rules flipped, strengthened ancient religion by airing its absurdities, or weakened it by normalizing mockery. The evidence wears festival garlands either way, in the right season. Villages paraded with jokes, masks, and noisy songs that poked at propriety. Perhaps Sisyphus has engineered his own private season, a perennial carnival where failure is rehearsed until it forgets to humiliate. The rock slides a palm's breadth, reconsiders, then consents to another. Your forearms throb in a reasonable way. Sisyphus very seriously clears his throat. Time for the anthem. He chants, deadpan. Push, pause, pivot, please don't pancake. You answer with harmony. Nudge, nudge, breathe, dignity intact. Together you keep the hymn soft enough not to tempt slapstick. The boulder hums its gravelly bass. For one absurd, perfect moment, you hear the trio. Quirky returns with a flourish. Once I stacked pebbles into little cairns along the path, Sisyphus confesses. Hermes kicked them down. I thanked him for tiding. He winks. It's important that every prank ends with gratitude. Drives gods crazy. Joke number 3 threads itself through your ribs. Polite defiance now, with 30% more manners. You both nearly drop the stone laughing. The hill accepts the tax and lets you keep going. Another fact like a stray coin. Corinth, Sisyphus's city, sat on a trade choke point, the isthmus where clever tolls and road tricks made kings rich and travelers annoyed. Some later writers even whispered he founded the Isthmian Games, a festival of athletic tests and poems beside the sea. Whether or not that's true, the detail feels apt. Contests, poems, and tolls are exactly the world this prankster would curate. Up ahead, a treacherous ledge. You remember it. The boulder remembers it better. Sisyphus lowers his center, turns his shoulder a hair, and says, we give the gods the scene they expect, but not the emotion. You copy him. The rock leans, thinks, then relents for a breath. The ledge passes in a slip of dust and a thump that shakes your molars. There, he says lightly. We just rewrote a line and kept the plot. Historians still argue whether the endurance here is admirable or pitiable. But standing with Sisyphus, you feel a third option, comedic courage. Not the big trumpet kind with speeches and banners, but the small stubborn smirk that keeps a soul from dissolving into its task. The prank isn't to topple Olympus. It's to remain yourself in a script that wants to turn you into a stage direction. Of course the boulder bolts. That's its contract. You step aside in your well-practiced flourish. Sisyphus mirrors you, and the stone gallops downhill with a confidence you someday hope to borrow. Gravel applauds. The valley answers with a dampened echo. Silence stitches the slope back together with quick, invisible hands. You walk down, not defeated, just unsweety in a different place. Sisyphus uncorks an imaginary amphora and toasts the air. To Zeus, he says, cheerful as a tavern host, producer and audience, long may his patience be tested. You clink your dry palm to his. The toast tastes like dust and relief. At the base, the rock looks exactly as it always does. Indifferent, available, ready for its next cue. You and Sisyphus look exactly as you have learned to look. A bit amused, a bit winded, fully awake. We begin again, he says, as if pronouncing a blessing. And importantly, we smuggle jokes past the bouncers. You set your hands. The hill clears its throat. Above, whatever gods are listening receive tonight's offering. Two mortals who refuse to give them tragedy on demand. Instead, you give them craft, cadence, and a stubborn grin. The prank lands softly, but it lands. The slope takes its familiar first breath, dust lifting like an opening curtain, and you and Sisyphus lean in with the kind of practiced grace that makes repetition look almost choreographed. He glances at you with a sidelong grin. Ever wonder what it's like to build cathedrals one pebble at a time? The question doesn't really need an answer. The rock creaks under your palms, and the hill rolls out its stone-backed hymn. He means it though. Because hidden under the endless prank is a quieter layer architecture without buildings. Each push, he says, is a column, each stumble, an arch. Zeus thinks I'm punished, but I'm just building an invisible city that only I can walk. You smile at the audacity, turning futility into urban planning. Joke number 1 slides from your lips before you can stop it. Great news, the invisible city now has affordable housing. Rent is 1 pebble a month. Sisyphus snorts, coughs on dust, then thanks you for the upgrade. The rock obliges for a few more paces, your knees tracing lines in gravel. Historians still argue whether ancient mythmakers pictured him as a genius condemned or a fool finally caught in his schemes. The ambiguity is baked into the tale. A Corinthian king with too much cunning, too much charm, sentenced to a task both simple and endless. Was that divine justice or divine irony? You can almost see the scribes debating it over wine, pen scratching, laughter and groans mixing. In the margins, mainstream fact checks in politely. Corinth's wealth didn't come from myth, but from geography. The isthmus funneled merchants between seas, and tolls were the gold veins of the city. Archaeology even suggests attempts at a canal centuries before Rome dug theirs, a dream of cutting through stone to save weeks of sailing. No wonder a king of Corinth became shorthand for clever shortcuts. The place itself whispered loopholes. Sisyphus hears your thoughts without needing them voiced. The canal dream, yes, he says, sweat carving tracks through dust on his cheeks. Men wanted to cleave the earth like bread. The gods wanted to keep the loaf whole. Guess who wins? He chuckles at his own metaphor. You picture a divine baker smacking mortal hands with a wooden spoon. Joke number 2. Maybe that's why Poseidon stays salty. The king almost doubles over laughing, shoulders wobbling dangerously against the boulder. You steady it, heartbeat quickening, then realize the absurdity, nearly flattened because of a dad joke. The hill approves, rumbling softly with stones. Quirky tidbit peeks in wearing its cloak of gossip. Sisyphus is also rumored to have outwitted Thanatos, chaining death itself so mortals stop dying until Ares, annoyed at the paperwork backlog, set things right. You can't resist whispering, so basically you invented the world's worst customer service delay. He bows without breaking stride. Your calves ache in rhythm with your breath. Sisyphus teaches you a trick. Count every 10th step backward. 9, 8, 7, he mutters, and suddenly the climb feels like it's moving towards zero, toward a pause instead of stretching into infinity. You copy him. It works. A tiny rebellion against arithmetic itself. Above, clouds smudge the sun, turning the slope into parchment washed with gray ink. Historians still argue whether the punishment here was meant as warning or comfort. Was Sisyphus's struggle a cautionary tale for the ambitious? Don't cheat the gods. Don't break oaths. Don't try shortcuts. Or was it an echo of every farmer, every laborer, pushing against cycles that never quite end? Grain today, grain tomorrow. Walls today, walls tomorrow. The myth might sting less if you recognize yourself in it. Sisyphus nods at your thought, lips pressed in a line of tired wisdom. Every farmer rolling his plow into spring soil. Every soldier patrolling the same stretch of wall. Every potter throwing another pot. He shrugs. I'm just the exaggerated version. A caricature, like those festival masks' nose too long, grin too wide. They laugh, but they also nod. The rock slips a fraction, the slope snarling its reminder. You both hunker down, heels carving tracks in the dust. The moment passes, and the climb resumes, steadier than before. Joke number 3 keeps your lungs light. Congratulations, we've just won the gold medal in synchronized suffering. Sisyphus cackles, almost musical, then claps you on the shoulder as if awarding you a laurel wreath. Mainstream history adds another thread to the tapestry. In Greek theater, heroes often faced impossible tasks, not to be solved, but to reveal character. Heracles wrestled labors, Odysseus wrestled time, Sisyphus wrestles inevitability. The pattern mattered more than the ending. Audiences watch not for triumph, but for endurance, painted large on the stage of myth. You think of endurance now as sweat beads at your temple. Each beat a story, each grunt a line in a hidden play. The hill isn't hostile so much as consistent, like a stern teacher who refuses to soften the assignment. And yet, step after step, you and Sisyphus turn consistency into companionship, futility into choreography. The top remains stubbornly distant, blurred in the haze. Sisyphus tilts his head, as though he can hear an audience somewhere, centuries away, sighing into their pillows. They think I'm suffering, he says with a sly wink. I'm actually rehearsing. He doesn't explain what for. Perhaps a future, perhaps nothing more than the next laugh. And then, inevitably, the rock betrays its weight. A skid, a thunder, a slide that rips the slope open like a drum roll. Down it goes, faster than you'd care to measure. The dust follows, patient and loyal. Sisyphus shades his eyes, watches the boulder bounce with almost paternal fondness. Every joke needs an ending, he says softly, so the next one can begin. You descend, legs grateful for release. The valley waits, horizon-wide air, cooling your lungs. At the bottom, the boulder rests, smug as ever. Sisyphus pats it as though it were a well-fed mule. You pat it too, caught up in the strange ritual. Then, together, you set your shoulders once more. The cycle continues, but so does the laughter tucked like contraband into its folds. And somewhere above, gods frown, wondering why tragedy keeps sounding suspiciously like rehearsal for a play they never wrote. The rock glimmers faintly in the sun, as if it knows what comes next. You and Sisyphus circle it like two conspirators, dusted shoulders brushing, both stalling for just a heartbeat longer before you begin again. This is the part one enjoy, he says deadpan. You squint at him. The part where your lungs explode? He shakes his head, hair sticking like blackened straw. No, the part where everyone thinks it's the end, but it's really just the punchline. And so the climb begins again. Same slope, same dust, same ache, but your awareness shifts. It's not punishment. It's rehearsal, practice, a warm-up for eternity. Joke number 1 lands early. Great, we're stuck in the world's longest gym membership with no cancellation policy. Sisyphus wheezes out a laugh, palms bracing against the stone like a lifeline. Mainstream history creeps in with sober tones. The myth of Sisyphus was recorded in works by Homer and later by philosophers who loved it for its bleakness. Plato mentioned him briefly. Later, Roman poets sketched him as the archetype of wasted labor. The detail became shorthand for futility in literature across centuries. And yet quirky tidbit alert medieval monks sometimes scribbled him into marginalia alongside doodles of snails jousting with knights. Imagine a scribe pausing mid-sermon copying to chuckle at a cartoon of a king endlessly pushing his snail boulder. Uphill. Futility, but cute. Historians still argue whether the myth was meant primarily as moral punishment or as an ironic joke at human persistence. Some insist the Greeks, practical and often playful, told it with a grin. Others argue it was deadly serious, a warning not to overstep divine boundaries. Sisyphus seems to know both interpretations, carrying them like twin baskets balanced across his shoulders. You climb, each breath tracing the hill's rhythm. Dust clings to your teeth, the air tasting faintly metallic. He teaches you another trick. Pretend each step is different. This one's for my wife, he says. This one for the banquet I skipped. This one for every sailor I overcharged on the isthmus. You mimic him, inventing your own. This one's for my broken sandals. This one's for that rooster that won't shut up. By the time you're both laughing, you've stumbled 20 paces without noticing. The hill softens for a moment, its gradient less cruel. The boulder rolls more willingly, as if mocking your brief optimism. Joke number 2 emerges in a puff of dust. Congratulations, we've unlocked easy mode. Next round, boulder with wheels. Sisyphus cackles, sweat streaking down his chin, and mutters something about filing a request form with Zeus. Another fact interrupts politely. Corinth, his city, was famed for its cunning. Its rulers played powers against each other, selling favors to Athens and Sparta alike. Archaeological digs show luxurious pottery and architecture. It wasn't a poor kingdom clawing for survival. It thrived by being clever. Perhaps too clever, if the gods had any say. The king shrugs as if reading your thoughts. I just did what my city taught me. Bargain here, trick there, collect a toll, pocket the coin. Corinth was a crossroads. I was just the most Corinthian. Corinthian, he grins. Quirky tidbit flickers again. Some stories say he chained Hades himself when death came calling, and for days the underworld had no new arrivals. The living couldn't die, and the gods panicked. Farmers cursed him because their pigs wouldn't stop squealing in agony, unable to pass on. Even war lost its sting when every wound healed without an ending. A cosmic customer complaint line. And Sisyphus was the hold music. Historians still argue whether that tale is parody or serious addition. Did he cheat death to highlight human arrogance, or was it a comic interlude slipped into darker lore? Scholars raise brows, scribble essays, and still can't agree. The hill rears higher, and your thighs burn. The boulder trembles like a sulky. Ox, joke number 3 slips through your teeth. We should start charging spectators. 2 drachmas to watch 2 idiots reenact futility. Sisyphus grins wide. I'd finally make honest money. Above, clouds thin, sunlight spills. Back, and the horizon gleams. The boulder's shadow stretches beside you, a black twin reminding you of inevitability. The silence grows comfortable, like an old blanket. Footsteps, grunts, gravel sliding, heartbeats synchronizing. And then, predictably, the boulder decides it's had enough. A tremor, a lurch, and it rips free from your palms. Down it barrels, roaring in stone laughter. Dust clouds bloom, painting the valley in brown haze. Sisyphus doesn't curse, doesn't groan. He simply watches, head tilted like a craftsman judging his handiwork. Perfect form, he says with mock solemnity. If futility were an art, that descent would win the festival. You descend again, slower this time, letting knees savor gravity. The valley smells of hot rock and memory. At the bottom, the boulder waits, smug and silent. Sisyphus pats it fondly, like a stubborn mule. "See," he tells you, "it always rolls back." But the trick, he pauses, brushing dust from his hands. The trick is that so do we. And so you prepare for another climb, shoulders braced, lungs filling. The cycle continues, absurd but oddly comforting, like a story retold until it becomes lullaby. The rock gleams with a kind of eternal smugness, its round belly catching what little light filters through the clouds. You and Sisyphus stand at the bottom of the slope again, feet sunk in loose dust, shoulders aching, but there's no urgency in the air anymore. The hill looms, the task waits, yet both feel softened like the sharp edges of reality have dulled into ritual. "Ready?" he asks, though you both know the answer is irrelevant. You nod anyway, palms against rough stone, dust sticking to. Sweat. The first push always hurts the most. Muscles complaining like children told to clean their rooms. But after a few strides, the rhythm sets in. You breathe out, he breathes in, the stone grinds forward. The cycle resumes, familiar, dependable. Mainstream history would insist that myths like this are tragedies, eternal punishments. That's the official record, no happy ending, just a man and a rock forever locked in parody. Yet the quirky tidbit floats up again. Some modern interpreters insist that Sisyphus isn't defeated at all. He is, in a way, the ultimate rebel, choosing to smile even as the gods scowl. You sense that here, with each heave of the boulder, each slip of gravel underfoot, he's proving that interpretation true. Historians still argue whether the myth was always meant to be this bleak, or if it picked up its reputation over centuries of retelling. Was it originally a cautionary tale, or just an old fireside story about the cost of cleverness? Did the Greeks laugh when they first told it, or sigh? You'll never know. But watching Sisyphus grin through grit suggests one answer over another. The climb drags on longer than before. You feel every pebble in your sandals, each grain of dust grinding between your teeth. Your lungs scrape dry air, and your arms buzz with effort. But strangely, you also feel calm, almost lulled. The monotony is steady, predictable. Joke number one tumbles out. If this hill had a loyalty card, we'd have earned a free coffee ages ago. Sisyphus snorts, mutters about demanding better perks from Olympus. You notice the world around you fading at the edges, blurred into softness. The sky above looks less like a dome and more like parchment brushed with faint watercolor. The grass that clings to the slope whispers in the wind like it's telling secrets you're too tired to catch. The rock itself seems lighter, not in weight but in spirit, as though it too has accepted the endless joke. Another historical thread winds in. Ancient Greeks loved stories of eternal cycles. Tantalus forever reaching for fruit, Prometheus forever chained, the Danaids forever filling leaking jars. Sisyphus joins their ranks, each condemned, each eternal. But here's the quirky twist. Where others suffer, he smiles. Where others despair, he cracks a joke about gym fees. Maybe that's the real secret, that eternity doesn't have to be unbearable if you learn to wink at it. The slope sharpens again, as if to remind you not to get too comfortable. Your thighs shake, your shoulders groan, but the rhythm carries. Sisyphus hums tunelessly, his voice cracked but steady. Joke number two comes through his grin. One day the gods will check in and realize, I've pushed this hill taller than Olympus itself. You nearly trip laughing, picturing Zeus peeking down and realizing his punishment turned into construction. Dust hangs in the air, catching sunlight in faint gold. For a heartbeat, the world looks painted, frozen in an illuminated miniature stone. And sweat and stubborn smiles rendered in tiny, careful strokes. It feels eternal in a way that isn't punishment but art. And then, as always, the boulder betrays you. It slips, lurches, tears itself free, and barrels down. You watch it go, rolling faster, crashing, echoing. The sound fades, replaced by silence. But it's a silence, one you've grown used to. No frustration, no curse, just the end of one loop and the start of the next. Sisyphus claps his hands, dust puffing off. "Well," he says, "we'd better not keep it waiting." Joke number 3 sneaks out as you descend. "At least the commute is downhill." He laughs again, a laugh that sounds less like defeat and more like ownership. The hill belongs to him, the boulder belongs to him, and eternity, well, eternity might belong to him too. At the base, the stone waits, just as smug as ever. But you no longer see it as an enemy. It's a partner, a rival, a companion in this endless dance. You place your palms against it, feeling the rough grooves, and sense not futility, but routine. Routine is survivable. Routine can even be comforting. And so the cycle begins once more. The climb, the sweat, the laughter, the fall, the return. Each push is the same, yet never quite identical. Each descent is defeat, yet never final. In the myth, you realize the gods gave Sisyphus eternity. But what he carved from it, humor, resilience, defiance, that was his secret trick. And now, it's yours too. Word count, 1083, wind down, approximately equals 300 words. The hill fades slowly, its steepness softening in your memory, until it becomes little more than a gentle slope brushed with dusklight. The boulder, once heavy and unyielding, rests quietly at the base, no longer daring you but simply existing, like a round shadow settled into earth. The air cools, carrying only the faintest scent of dust and stone, and each sound, each sigh of wind, each crunch of gravel grows slower, fainter, as if the world itself is ready for sleep. You imagine lying down again on a reed mat, the ground firm beneath your back, the stars above beginning their slow shimmer across a parchment sky. The labor is behind you for now, stored away in the folds of myth. What lingers is not the strain, not the futility, but the rhythm steady, familiar, even soothing. Push, breathe, release. A cycle so predictable, it becomes a lullaby. Sisyphus himself grows hazy in your mind, his grin fading into the quiet, but the echo of his laughter remains, warm and surprisingly gentle. He was never crushed by the task. He shaped it into something livable, something almost light. And as your thoughts soften, you realize that even the heaviest burdens can lose their sharpness when you choose to carry them with a smile. The boulder waits, but it can wait forever. For now you're still, wrapped in calm, the world hushed around you. Let your breathing slow, let your eyes grow heavy. Let the story settle into silence. Sweet dreams.